This podcast is brought to you by ORCHSE Strategies, an industry leader in developing innovative, sustainable approaches for protecting workers and the environment. And a big thank you for their sponsorship to the Pre-Accident Podcast. ORCHSE's main focus and passion is in fostering EH&S performance excellence in all their companies. When members participate in one or more of ORCHSE's 9 different specialized networks, or if they engage in one of their task force or working groups, something very special happens. The sharing of ideas frequently results in cutting-edge solutions that have practical applications immediately. For example, ORC has been at the forefront of efforts to create new approaches for fatal and serious injury prevention and has helped plan, conduct, and create conferences on human and organizational performance. If you're interested in learning more about the unique opportunities available through ORCHSE, please contact our buddy Linda Haney at 202-510-0509. Or, if you'd rather pop her an email, it's linda.haney, LINDA.HANEY, at ORCHSE.com. Now, let's listen to the podcast.
I'm an engineer, and the first rule is if it works, keep your fingers off it.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Pre-Accident Podcast. I am Todd Conklin. I'll be driving the adventure wagon as we go down this safari into new view, safety, and reliability. How'd that sound? That was poetic, I think. It actually sounded like I rehearsed that, and of course I did, because every word that is spoken on the podcast is carefully rehearsed and vetted by a panel of very smart Supreme Court justices, I think. Yeah, let's go with that, if that sounds good. Hey. So here we are, pounding away at 2017. So for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, I bet you're just loving summer and kind of hanging out and enjoying all the good summer stuff. Just know, as you enjoy summer in New Zealand, or summer in Australia, right, or summer in Latin America, just know, as you enjoy that we are in the midst of winter, and winter is cold and foreboding. People like winter, and I live in a kind of a ski place, so, I mean, it's probably good for business, and the restaurants do well, but it's cold, and I don't like snow, and I hate the fact that every plane trip you take, you really are sort of one flake of snow away from not making your connection. At least that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it, because why wouldn't you stick to it? Gosh, things are good. I mean, it seems like it's really good. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and thanks for making suggestions about who should be on this podcast. In fact, this week's, that's kind of exactly what happened. So we're going to talk to Carston Busch. And I don't know if you know Carston or not. I've been aware of him a long time. He wrote a book, a pretty sweet little book called Safety Myth 101, Musings on Myths, Misunderstandings, and More, which is not actually easy to read. But, it's an easy read. That title's hard to say out loud publicly on a microphone. And what Carston has sort of taken on is all the mythology that's existed in safety for so long, kind of the non-empirical belief that, for instance, frequency and severity are connected, kind of a, not to dog Heinrich, but that kind of Heinrich model. Even the idea around zero, or the one I deal with all the time, which he talks about a bunch, is the fact that people truly believe all accidents are preventable before the event happens. Carston's cool, and you're going to like him. Put on your wooden shoes, because he's Dutch, so you're going to get a little visit internationally, unless you're there, and then it's kind of homecoming. But he's got a background that I find really interesting and super varied, because he really came into safety really on the transportation side. rail safety. And he talks a lot, knows a lot about rail safety, but he's kind of moved around. He went offshore on kind of the whole Norway push there because there's tons of work there. And he's currently, this is the part I find so stimulating, he's currently working with the police force. And that is actually a really challenging way to understand safety and variability at every level. It's a great little conversation, just like most of them are. We talk about a bunch of stuff, but I want you to kind of listen carefully. There's a really good moment in this podcast where I would think a lot of learning is going to happen. You'll pick up on it right away, so I won't say much more about it other than to tell you, maybe I'll come in on the backside of the podcast and discuss the phenomena that happened in the middle of our conversation. So I hope you're good, and I hope everything's going great for you. If there's anything we can do for you, hook us up. Lots of excitement around the Learning Team Workshop in Vegas. That's March 22nd, 23rd. And we're getting quite a few people signed up. And it's always so interesting to me where people come from because it's always different places than I think they would. I think you'll find that workshop really good. Bob Edwards is remarkable at it, and it's fun for me to get to be a part of it. And I'm certainly going to be on the docket for a lot of discussion on both the first and the second day. Plus, it's Vegas, so you're never very far away from a good buffet. So, with that sort of spoken, and great wishes for, the continuance of 2017, even though we're in the first quartile, it seems like it's moving fast already. Let's jump into the podcast. So, here is Carston Busch and a discussion, a conversation, if you will, around the ability to drown in your own success. Here's Carston.
Okay, well, how detailed do you want it?
I would keep it at a higher level. I wouldn't go, into your grammar school instructors' names. I wouldn't go that deep.
No, but let's just, since I mentioned engineer, I'm educated mechanical engineer. I hated it within the first month, but luckily I came into a practical year where I had to do something with safety and environmental care, and I thought, well, this mentor of mine, he must be mad because we don't teach this, get taught this at school. And then it turned out to be fascinating, so I decided, well, I'm going to try to get a job in this field. And so I did. I graduated, worked, got my first job in safety in Dutch Railways, or daughter of Dutch Railways. Spent there many years, moved on to other companies, moved to Norway in the railways, moved a bit back to the Netherlands, worked in offshore, best paid course ever, because that's not my sector, and went back to Norway, and I'm working now as an advisor for occupational safety and health in the Politiedirectoraten, which is the organization that is over the national police force in Norway.
Wow.
Which is a fascinating area to work in professionally and,
on
many different levels.
Oh, yeah, I would think so. So what is it that you're thinking is making safety so fascinating to you? What is it that attracted you? It couldn't have been the compliance activity, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't the chance to write policy. What is it that sort of piqued your interest?
Well, what got me initially was the great variation of stuff, because you have a bit of the legal stuff, and I even studied Dutch law for some years, and you have the people stuff, you have the chemical stuff, you have all the hazards and the engineering stuff. So it's a bit of everything, and that really fascinated me, because one day isn't the same as the next. And it's also, of course, the bit where you help people. I don't make them go home safe at night, but I imagine I have a contribution there.
How do you define safety?
Yeah, that's a fun one. and it shifts pretty much, but most of the time I'm going for the rather standard, not being opposed to unacceptable risk or taking the level that is acceptable to you, that kind of stuff.
Do you guys think you guys in Europe define safety differently than, I don't know, Australia, different than North America? I mean, do you think we're coming to kind of one global new definition, or are we still kind of moving depending on geography and culture?
I think it differs a bit because there are a lot of people who still define safety in terms of not having accidents. And, well, that's problematic, and I don't do that. But I think it's pretty common over the world to define, or there are some organizations that define safety in terms of risk, because, well, the two concepts are connected, and it makes sense, and you can work with it on a good level, I think.
But I'm pretty convinced, and I'd be curious what you think. I'm pretty convinced the more I work with this, the more difficult it actually is to define the notion of safety and risk. I mean, it's not getting easier. It seems to be getting much more convoluted, a little bit looser, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I've studied a lot about risk in past years. And it's pretty slippery. When I was younger, well, you had a hazard, and that was a hazard, and there was a risk connected to the hazard, and you were able to say something about how large it is. But that's, of course, a very static view of risk that is good to do as a, well, let's say, theoretical or analytic exercise, but it's not how it's in reality. I love this quote by John Adams from his book Risk, where he says, "A risk perceived is a risk acted upon," which means as soon as you have seen a risk, it's not the same anymore. You've seen the stairs, you're aware of the stairs, you're going to handle the stairs. So it's not like you stumble upon the stairs. You can still trip and fall and that kind of stuff, but it's not the same anymore. And, well, that applies to all risk. So when we sit down in a risk assessment, the risks that we are going to discuss there will be there-ish, but they will be different than we have written down.
That's really interesting. So the other day I was on a plane, and it was completely full. Every seat was full. And so a person had to come and sit right next to me. And that was great. I mean, we had a good time. And he clearly was a finance guy. And he was talking to me about risk. And he told me that you don't manage risk in finance. You manage actually your diversification. And I thought that was really interesting because in our world, I would agree, I don't manage risk. I actually manage my capacity to do high-risk work safely. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a different world for them, and I must say I've read a bit of Taleb many years ago, and I've read other books on risk many years ago where I thought this is not relevant for me because they talk so differently about it. But I'm actually going back to them and think, well, there's a lot of it. Because they also look at the positive sides, and, well, spreading your risk, it's harder in safety than in finance probably.
Yeah, it's kind of when you think about it that way, it's kind of interesting because where once I think I'm like you, I sort of looked at a classic Western economic definition of risk, probability times severity, and thought, that's insufficient, that's not enough. I'm now realizing that maybe that Western economic definition of safety or of risk is not enough, but the way economists are looking at risk, John Adams is a great example of that. He's probably really more of a geographer and an economist than he is a safety person. But I love the idea with this guy in the plane next to me that they don't manage risk. Risk is just there. You manage your diversification. So I was thinking about my portfolio because I got like $11. I should put $3 in one thing, $3 in another thing, and then keep $3 in my mattress and spend the other $2, and I'd be good to go. That's my theory on that anyway.
How they manage it. And then on an abstract level, I think we're kind of doing the same thing, but, well, the tools are not quite the same. Because we also try to, well, spread it a bit, and, well, maybe we do a bit less of an activity, and we get a bit more protection. That's, well, diversification on another level.
If you were going to work with somebody that's just starting this kind of thinking, just moving from the traditional view, kind of the safety one, the Hallnagel safety one, to sort of towards the safety two view, where would you tell them to start? What would you tell them to think about? Because, Carston, I kind of see you as, you're really a kind of a guide. When I look at the way you interface with the world, you're often giving people, lists of books to read, and if you've got some time, look into this. I noticed you just put a posting out on Freakonomics and Dubner and Levitt, those guys. Where would you sort of ask people to start this journey, and how would you guide them through this journey?
Well, the thing I often start with is by this picture that I saw Hallnagel draw in, I think it was 2009 or 2011, in a safety conference at Trondheim, where he drew a circle and he put a red line in it. And he said, this red line, this is a 1% human failure, human error or faults or things that go wrong. And the whole circle, it's the entire set of operations. And that's the 99.9% of things that go right. And we only look at this red line. We spend all of our time on the red line. Why don't we just spend some time also on the rest of the green circle? I think that's, and I see when I draw this to people, they say, "Oh, well, we've never looked at it this way. Maybe we should spend some time on the positive side too." And then, of course, comes the difficult part: what should we look at? But that's often my opener.
That's a great opener. What do you tell them then when they go out to look for successful work that's happening that's not failing? What do you tell them to look for? How do you tell them to monitor and understand that?
One of the obvious things to look for is, of course, conflicting goals, because we have them all the time. And then all the smart things we do to make our everyday work a bit easier. What are the shortcuts in a positive way? I had a discussion with one of the managers in our place the other day, and there has been an incident, and well, people hadn't cleared the car, so people had taken another car, and something happened, and he said, and of course they should have cleared the car, and this was just sloppy, and well, I'm going to straighten them up a bit. And I said, you say this now because you know that something went wrong. If this hadn't happened, you would have said, well, this is very efficient because you need your stuff tonight again. Yeah. Well, that's that was a good point. I said, this is how real work happens. If stuff goes great, you don't bother and you just do more of it. And if it goes wrong, then it's probably it's suddenly an error. Look at the smart things. Well, what do we do that are not compliant, but not really non-compliances either?
That's actually a really interesting thing you just said. Look at the things that we do that are not compliant, but are also not really non-compliant. I think the challenge we have, and I've thought about this a bunch, is that we're sort of drowning in a sea of success. That if we tried to track successful work, we wouldn't have systems large enough or clipboards big enough or behavior observation sheets plenty enough to actually look at all the things that go well. That'd be hard. But I love this idea that we look for things that are not necessarily compliant, but aren't necessarily non-compliant. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and they're not easy to see. Because for the people, they're just normal. And, well, the bosses don't get into the details. They just see the job gets done and they deliver. And I don't get any bad reports, so it's probably fine. And, well, I said the people, to them, it's normal. And that's probably the problem of learning of success, because it's so normal. I'm not a psychologist, and you should talk to my wife, but as I understand it, the people are very focused on differences, different things. I've even read a book, I don't recall what, that your eye has to move constantly, else you don't see a thing. The non-moving things, at least.
It must be interesting at your dinner table. If you're an engineer and you're married to a psychologist, you must have some pretty holistic dinner discussions.
Yeah, we have them sometimes. No, I was just saying that's what it makes so hard for us, because we don't usually stand still and look back on our behavior, because we fixed the job. What's there we just do it again next time this happens. We don't look back critically and think, well, was this actually how we should do it? Should we really have crossed that red, or was speeding so smart, and that kind of stuff.
So all of a sudden now, there are all these special meetings and special programs that you can buy out there in the world that focus specifically on fatalities and serious events, and they're calling them like SIF, serious injury and fatality, and they're selling them as and put quotes around the word selling. I think some people actually are selling these ideas, but these ideas are being introduced as sort of specialty areas in safety management. What's your feeling on that?
Okay, can I just ask a clarifying question? Is this about serious incidents and fatalities that have happened, or events that have the capacity to develop to a serious incident or fatality?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think as crappy as the answer I'm going to give you is, I think it's both. I think the idea is that you could prevent these somehow, and because there's a belief that we're insufficient at preventing. The idea is that really safe organizations still kill people.
Yeah, well, probably not on purpose.
Well, let's hope not on purpose, at least.
No.
Although that's easier to fix.
Maybe. Not if they're really smart about it. Let me take the first version of SIF, because I've heard the term, but I've really never looked into it. And this sounds maybe a bit wrong, but I'm so not interested in consequences. In my company, my organization, I should say, and many other organizations, the thing that is monitored is HSE numbers that are injuries with persons. And, well, I told people at my job, we probably have to do this because the authorities, they want to know, and the ministry we report to, they want to know, and the HSE executive, etc. But I'm not really interested in the consequences, in how many people we injured. I'm interested in the events. What was there, and what can we learn from it? And if there is a consequence, it's so extremely random and stochastic if they happen or not. In my previous job, I worked in railway safety, and whether we had an incident on a level crossing where the train crosses the road, or the road crosses to the rails, actually. If there is an incident on a level crossing, you can have no consequence at all. You can have one killed in a car. You can have a school bus with children killed in the car. And everybody thinks the latter one is the most, we should put most effort in. No, the incident is the same. It's just bad luck that there was a bus.
That's
you get what I mean. So I'm not really interested in what the consequence is. You can't do anything about it.
I would suggest the consequence is the least interesting part of the failure in all cases. I like the way you're thinking. I asked that question just because I'm really starting to see sort of a commercialization of these specialty programs to attack this, and it worries me. It worries me a lot because the feeling I'm getting is that somehow if we did the same things we were doing now harder or better or more effective or deeper or longer, whatever word you want to use, that we would actually avoid the ability to kill people. I'm pretty certain that fatalities aren't prevented. Consequences are controlled.
Yeah. So focus, and this is no rocket science, and this is no new way of thinking safety, because this is basically what Mr. Heinrich told us in 1931. Don't look at the accidents, or don't look at the consequences. Don't look at the injuries. Look at the accidents. You can maybe learn something from them, and hopefully you get rid of the consequences as well.
Mr. Heinrich, what a place to go.
We should return to 2016 maybe, but that's just this is not new, and I can imagine, and I share your worries about firms or consultancies selling this kind of programs, and I can imagine that they're very attractive, because serious injury and fatality, it sounds scary. You don't want to have them in your organization. So you probably need this kind of program to prevent them. So that they should really sell well, I guess.
So what are you thinking now? What are you reading? What are you looking ahead? What's interesting you right now?
Right now? Yeah, right now what am I reading actually? A book about risk. That's not exciting. I've just read some other old stuff. That's Man-Made Disaster by Barry Turner. I was so happy to track down a payable copy. And I was again amazed what kind of advanced stuff there was like 40 years ago.
That is encouraging, kind of. I mean, it's nice to know that people, it's reinforcing to know that people 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, were starting to really have these ideas and push out and kind of learn from them. This was great. Thanks for your time, man. This was a really good little conversation. I enjoyed it immensely. Okay. What'd you think?
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
So there you got it. What do you think? I thought that was a great little conversation. So here's the part I was going to tell you before, but I waited to tell you after. I like the phrase where he says, they're doing work that is not necessarily compliant, but it's not necessarily non-compliant. That's that line somewhere between good and bad, between right and wrong. The difference between a process improvement and a shortcut, adaption, whatever you want to call that. That's a really good way to sort of bring that operational ambiguity to the forefront. And it was effective in that it made me think about it a lot. I told you you'd like this podcast. He's really interesting. Check out his book for sure. He's also got a strong presence in the online communities. So you'll see him in, a whole bunch of different things. His name's been around a lot, and Carston's just a good guy. And it's always fun to spend time with a good guy. So that's it. That's the podcast for today. Have as much fun as you possibly can. Learn something new every single day. And until next time. Oh, by the way, be safe.